All right, let's get into Friday feedback for the week. You can always email info@davidpakman.com if you have something to say, positive, negative, constructive criticism, trolling, try to keep to a minimum, but we will also feature YouTube comments, Substack comments, Spotify replies, TikTok. You never know what will show up. We start with YouTube, where Danny Baker wrote, Trump says only a stupid person would turn down a free jet, while the rest of the world says only a stupid person thinks that it's free. This is a perfect example of the messaging disconnect that we've been talking about. Danny's making a joke about, Trump thinks only stupid people would turn down free jets. But the audience immediately understands nothing's really free when it comes to these political favors or gifts from billionaires. The pushback isn't about, oh, we're ungrateful for the generosity. It's not about that. It's that it is not merely generosity. It's that there are always strings attached. The real stupidity would be you don't recognize that every free ride comes with an expectation of reciprocity in politics. And if you think a free plane from Qatar doesn't come with that, who's really the short-sighted one? Trump insists anyone would be dumb not to accept the plane. We all insist Trump's very dumb to think that the plane is actually free. And I'm glad that the people in my audience have figured that out and figured it out very quickly. Dan Capine on Facebook wrote in and said about my book, The Echo Machine, David's Echo Chamber would have been a better title for your book. How much did you pay for the bestseller label? But seriously though, I am grateful for the fact you really don't have a clue what's going on. It's delicious. You know what's really funny? Dan brings up, I'll get to the book in a moment. Dan brings up an interesting point about echo chambers, though I think he's missing the crucial aspect of this. The suggestion that my audience doesn't have a clue what's going on is backwards. Our audience, when we do viewer surveys, our audience is consistently more informed about policy details, polling data, and political developments than the average cable news viewer. Now, do we have audience members who already lean left? Absolutely. But the echo chamber criticism falls apart when you look at how often we discuss, number one, uncomfortable truths about democratic failures, and number two, engage with right-wingers. All the time, I debated 20 of them on TikTok the other day, who have every opportunity to show me how wrong I am, and they fail to do so. So, actual echo chambers wouldn't engage with that. Now, about the book. When we were in the pre-order phase of the book, and I would say, hey, we've gotten to 3,000 pre-orders, we have 6,000 pre-orders, we have 8,000 pre-orders, I would get messages like this one from Dan, which would say, oh, what does it feel like to buy your own book? And as I explained previously, it's pointless to buy your own book in bulk, because all of the algorithms, including the New York Times bestseller one, are designed to exclude perceived bulk purchases of the book by the author. I know it's really hard for people who dislike me to understand this. My book was genuinely an instant New York Times bestseller. I'm so sorry that that's triggering to you, but it got to a level that only 0.15% of all books get, which is New York Times bestseller status. So the claims are, I'm the one who ordered all of the books, I paid someone to get on the list. Give me a break, guys. Give me a break. But it's kind of interesting that I'm living rent-free in your head. That's an interesting development. All right, let's go to Reddit. Righty Rip asks, does Trump last his term? I've been thinking lately, as all the news comes out about Joe Biden's decline in his last 2 years of his term, Donald Trump's decline is already beginning to manifest. From Tesla to having things constantly repeated to him, it seems to me we might get a repeat. Additionally, he's very unpopular and an authoritarian, so I wonder what people put the odds of him finishing a term and whether or not he dies in office or gets removed. So the Reddit post raises a legitimate analytical question. This is not like a wishful thinking thing. The poster mentions Trump's age, Trump's decline. We've documented endless of these concerning incidents. I don't want to do like speculative health analysis, which can be problematic. What we can analyze is objectively, language analyses of Trump show significant decline even over the last 2 years, never mind the last 8 to 10. Number two, Trump's almost 80, obese, doesn't exercise, and eats a terrible diet. Statistically, it is not, it wouldn't be a major shock if Trump died in office. At the same time, there's the concept of a super ager, people who once they get to a certain age, they stay relatively healthy well into their 80s. That could also be Trump. Now, on the does Trump get replaced thing? No. Trump does not get replaced. The Republican Party, once it looks like Trump has crested the horizon and is going over to greener pastures, be that as a lame duck after the 26 midterm, for example, you will see Republicans strategically start to disengage from Trump, but they're not going to remove Trump. Over on YouTube, Walter Ashmore says he suspends habeas corpus, people get violent in the streets. Then he declares martial law because of all the violence. Fascism playbook. This is exactly correct. Walter, knowingly or not, is describing a classic authoritarian escalation pattern. And that's exactly the kind of institutional stress testing that we should be monitoring. The suspension of habeas corpus, followed by a martial law declaration, is exactly the authoritarian playbook. We've seen a variation of it in Hungary. We've seen it in Poland in periods of time. Historically, we've seen it in Chile. So the key insight here is you often get a manufactured crisis or the exploitation of existing unrest, and then the reaction to that is used to justify a further clampdown. So absolutely correct analysis from Walter, and we need to pay very close attention to where that leads. Michael Shermer on Facebook says, I'm the David Pakman Show, and I'm a pathetic propagandist hack journalist and have run out of content. So I keep saying Trump has dementia and Caroline Leavitt is stupid. I have zero political substance in my contact, so I'm just name calling and reaching for any views as I live in my own echo chamber. You know, Michael's comment is probably the most honest thing I've read in weeks. He's essentially admitting that he is tuning in for confirmation bias rather than information. Anything that conflicts with his existing worldview, he dismisses. And you know what? At least he's self-aware about it. But it does raise a pretty disturbing question about media consumption in 2025, and I'm sort of starting to research this more deeply for my next book. What is the difference between giving people what they want to hear versus giving people what they need to hear? Now, I try to do both, okay? When I believed that Biden, despite having age-related decline, was still the most likely to win, I told you that. And then when my view on that changed after the June 27 debate, and I no longer believed Biden fit that bill, I told you that. There were people in the audience who didn't like when I changed my mind based on the facts. And that is, if anything, one of the bigger conflicts that I sometimes have with the audience, which is we don't want to hear that Harris is losing in the polls. We don't want to hear that Biden maybe shouldn't be running. And so my primary goal here is always to tell you how I see it without dressing it up in a calculated way. And then beyond that, the analysis and the conclusions we come to are obviously open for discussion. Over on Spotify, I got the following message. Hey, David, huge fan of the show. I've been listening for almost a year now. My question is, how come reporters have to sit there and take verbal abuse from Trump? Obviously, it's decorum and proper not to talk back to a president, but nothing about how he talks to reporters is proper or respectful. Hopefully you get to this on a Friday episode. This is an extraordinarily good point, okay? We have seen presidential hostility by Trump to the press normalized. The idea that reporters should just sit there and take it because of decorum is exactly how authoritarian behavior gets normalized. Respect is earned through respect. When a president consistently attacks, mocks, and undermines journalists doing their jobs, I don't believe the appropriate response is silence acceptance. The press is supposed to be a check on power. Now, if when Trump attacks Caitlin Collins from CNN, if she starts insulting him, I don't think that that's the right response. It would just get her kicked out of the press briefing room. It would then, okay, she gets attention. But I think the right response would be, sir, I believe that's an inappropriate way to speak to a reporter. I think that approach, and then saying, and sir, you just said something that is factually untrue. So I would like to see a little more spark when Trump goes after reporters in this way. I don't need them hurling insults, but they also shouldn't ignore it completely. That's where I'm at on it. Let me know what you think. Jesse says, bro, enough commentary, just play the clip. Sorry, but you said cognitive collapse or something akin to it at the beginning of every video for weeks. To which Lurch replied, he did play the clip. And Jesse says, be a facts-based new reporter, not an opinion-based one. So I have two, these could be difficult truths for you, Jesse. Number one, this is an opinion show. Okay? The whole show is based around, what do I think about stuff? I don't claim to be a journalist or a reporter. I'm a commentator. If you don't want to hear my opinion, this is just the wrong show. and we've had many times where we have this conflict with people who go, I don't want to hear what you're saying, just play the clip. Well, this is the wrong show. This is an opinion show. Finally, we've gone back and forth about I play the clip right away and then comment on it, or I introduce the clip. We've landed on I introduce the clip. Again, if you don't like it, if you're watching on YouTube, you can skip right to where the clip starts. Do whatever you want. But this is my show at the end of the day. I will give my opinion, and the opinions will continue until the morale improves. Tater Tot Tushy wrote on TikTok, you guys are looking at this the wrong way. It's a numbers game. At the end of Trump's term, they're going to go, wow, look at all these people off of SNAP benefits. The economy is booming. This comment shows sophisticated political thinking. Congratulations, Tater Tot Tushy, a very sophisticated username. Tater Tot is recognizing that SNAP benefit usage is going to be weaponized for political messaging. That is a form of strategic analysis. We see it and we go, look, he didn't improve this metric. He didn't improve this metric. GDP is down, all these different things. And we say there's no case to be made that he's done a good job. But Tater Tot is recognizing you can go, hey, we got 75,000 people off of food stamps. That's a win. It doesn't matter if food stamps are the most economically stimulative form of government spending. They are. It doesn't matter if now people are struggling to find food, which they will. You can just go, we got 75,000 people off of food stamps. That's a win. You didn't get them off food stamps by getting their income up high enough that they no longer qualify. You just changed the rules of the program or stripped them or whatever. So this numbers game observation is very astute because it recognizes something that we sometimes miss, which is political messaging often matters way more than outcomes in electoral politics. We saw that in November. Very good comment. On the bonus show today, what happens to Doge now that Elon departs today, I believe? The White House is getting sued over getting rid of sign language interpreters, and the FBI says it's going to show us a video that will definitively prove Jeffrey Epstein took his own life. He was not killed. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpakman.com. It takes a minute. And remember to get on my newsletter on Substack, which will soon be relaunched, expanded, and rebranded. You can sign up at davidpakman.substack.com. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.